Good morning, shop rats. It's Talk About It Tuesday. We're going to continue on with our discussion about carburetor sizing. So let's call this Size Matters Part 2. Let's watch the show intro. I'll see you in about 30 seconds. I'm Mike, and this is My Car Shop.
Working out of a 100-year-old refurbished barn, bringing 35 years of experience to projects considered beyond repair. Vision, creativity, and problem solving are essential tools in this place. Watch as we transform junk into polished metal miracles. This is My Car's Shop.
One of the most popular videos on the channel right now is the episode that I did, a whiteboard episode about carburetor sizing. And there's been some very interesting discussion, and some people really agree with what I said, and other people don't. And, well, that's just the way it goes on YouTube. But the reality is that what I shared is not something that I came up with. It is an industry standard. It's a formula that helps to determine carburetor sizing. Now, one of the things that we talk about there is how people tend to put on too big a carburetor, and sometimes I feel like maybe that's some kind of phallic contest, but we won't go there. I feel like bigger is better is the mindset, and that's not necessarily true. I, in my own experience, have found that a smaller carburetor tends to perform better on a street car than a big carburetor. And there are so many variables and factors, and I don't want to say that the formula is bottom line always accurate and never wrong. Well, the formula isn't wrong. The math is the math, the science is the science, but there are so many variables in your particular application that you have to kind of consider that for yourself, and I can't possibly cover all of those in an episode about carburetor sizing. First of all, I will say, my background was in fuel system engineering, but I was more of a fuel injection guy. But I've been working with carburetors since the 1970s. So started out with go-karts and lawnmowers when I was a kid. So I've got a lot of experience with carburetors. But at the end of the day, there are people that are a lot smarter. And I'd like to call attention to a video by a channel that I'm familiar with, called Thunderhead 289, where he just recently did something that is so completely absurd, and if I didn't know that he was a trusted source and he's a very brilliant engineering type mind, I would believe the whole thing was BS. And even he himself says that, and I'll try to remember to put a link up here for that, so that you can watch that video. There's a series where he puts a lawnmower carburetor on a Ford V8 and runs it down the road in a Mustang. And there's a little bit of science involved and a little bit of electronics, but the reality is the thing runs pretty darn good. Now, he'll be the first to admit it's not a powerhouse, that's not the point, but he's also getting close to 40 miles to the gallon. So there you go on that. In the carburetor sizing episode that I did, we talked about a number that is a calculated number based upon the average engine of volumetric efficiency. And there's a lot of ways you can determine that and so forth, and we don't get into all of that. But we make the assumption, a baseline number that most people use for the formula for a mild performance street engine to help you size your carburetor. Remember that we're not talking about optimum performance when we're talking about sizing carburetors. We're talking about optimum functionality. There you go, that's the word. So in other words, we're not talking about, you can throw a 1050 carburetor on a 350 Chevy on a dyno and get some really outrageous high performance numbers, but is it drivable? Is it streetable? And that's more where I'm coming at things from. At the end of the day, you got to do what makes sense in your application. And I provided the episode simply as a baseline to help you think through some of the science behind sizing carburetors. It's all experience, right? And something I've not done that I've been thinking about playing with more is I've always done it by watching spark plug color and watching exhaust color and things like that. But, getting an air-fuel ratio sensor is not a bad way to go so that you can see actually what's happening. The second thing is, don't assume that the carburetor you have is functioning properly. I had a discussion with one fellow not too long ago about he's got a 750 and he tried to go to, I think it was a 600, and the 600 didn't perform well, and everything he was describing to me told me that there was something radically wrong with that carburetor. And he tended to agree. So, there's so many variables and things like that. But I present an episode like that just to make you think a little bit. We want a car, if you're building a dragster, a lot of this stuff goes out the window. But at the end of the day, if you're building a street car, you want something that's, you don't need to get every last horsepower out of the engine. You want something that's going to set you back in the seat good, maybe burn the tires nice, and get some semblance of fuel mileage and perform well so that you're not constantly fouling plugs and having drivability issues and having to go out and clean it out because it's getting loaded up. And there's just all kinds of factors. Another thing we haven't really talked about is fuel quality and how that affects all of this, because if you're using cheap junk pump gas that has a lot of ethanol, that also adds a different dynamic to a carbureted engine and can affect things that maybe we'll do some discussion about that at some point. But I just wanted to touch base on this again and say, use the formula, use it as a baseline, and then determine. Don't make your life decisions completely based upon a formula that, yes, is proven in science, but can't take into consideration all the variables that you have in your application. So, do me a favor and drop it down there in the comments. What other discussions would you like me to do when I have these Talk About It Tuesdays? Is there more things on carburetors you would like to see? Maybe some things on fuel injection, fuel pump sizing, I think we've talked about, but there's a lot more we can talk about there. There's just all kinds of stuff. And I'm happy to share my feeble little kindergarten level of knowledge with you. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do that. Hit the bell so you receive those notifications, because that's important. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps out everybody here on the channel. We're on the Face thing. We're over on Instantgrandma/My Car Shop. And one more thing.
Don't forget.
It's very important. Rock!